Hi, good afternoon. It's Gene from maverickstar Observatory. Guys, huge thanks for those few people, as always, that decided on the back of the last magnetic North Pole positioning would chuck in a few bucks. But you know, when we look at how many people have viewed it now, well over 9,000, and we take that into consideration, you know, we're still well under par on the support that we should be getting, especially when we take into consideration now that we are around 4 months from possibly something very large taking place. I'm talking about, of course, that theoretical 40 degrees mark. You know, based on the current rate at which the North Pole is migrating, we will arrive at that location of where the magnetic North Pole 40 degree mark is, and we could see an uptick in the climatic events that we've been witnessing in the increase over the last 30 years. So, you know, bear that in mind. You know, I think still more needs to be done, and absolutely more people need to come forward now as we are getting closer and closer to that mark. Yes, I do appreciate, you know, we're in times of hyperinflation, increasing interest rates going up, but this is the cabal which is manipulating this. This isn't just ordinary circumstances. This is gross misconduct on global governance, and you know, with the European Union sticking their foot in every 5 minutes, it's just making matters worse. But it is largely, and I know a lot of people aren't going to like this, it's largely our fault, because we, the populace, allow this to take place. And one of the most common reasons for this is because people feel that they are powerless to do anything about it. Well, so long as you have that pessimistic outlook in life, you know, you are going to find it very difficult to achieve anything positive or even optimistic. You know, that attitude needs to go if we want to make changes. Look, I'm just going to briefly talk about Kendall's data that he sent in. As you can see, you know, it's above the 58 point mark on the left hand column, where it was comfortably buffeting along that line last month. I've also noted that recently, you know, in the data that Kendall sends us with his muon data, that's been slightly increased. Maybe the two are linked. I did briefly touch on the subject of the increase in death rates. I just want to talk a little bit more about that. Right, so there's an increase in death rates globally across all age ranges. You can check it with your own government statistics on their website. The increase is in line with the increase during the pandemic at its highest point, and then you'll remember it went down. Now it's gone back up. In the UK, the average death rate every week is around 1,500 people. I found it very striking that the causes of these deaths were cardiac arrhythmias, in other words, heart attacks. And bear this in mind, this is across all age groups. Now, I did hint on the fact that it could be due to, or it could be a coincidence, that we know cosmic rays cause or lead to cardiac arrhythmias. This is proven, and the reason why we're getting obviously more cosmic rays into our upper atmosphere is because we're suffering with a grand solar minimum, low solar output, weakening the heliosphere, and our primary defence is weakened, the magnetosphere that protects Earth, due to this magnetic pole reversal. And both of these in turn allow cosmic rays in, and we know that cosmic rays are linked to cardiac arrhythmias. So I won't outrule cardiac arrhythmias caused by a grand solar minimum and a magnetic pole reversal just yet. However, I did give it some thought, and I thought, you know what, we would see a lot more pilots and cabin crew of aircraft falling by the wayside with cardiac arrhythmias if this was anything to be concerned about. I think that those people that put themselves more vulnerably in a position to be exposed to cosmic rays, and we know altitude is one of those things. So if you're frequently travelling on aircraft, or you're cabin crew or a pilot, you're going to be exposed to more radiation than anybody else on a prolonged period of time. So, you know, I would, on the back of that, suspect that we will see more of these people in these jobs falling by the wayside due to cardiac arrhythmias. But as far as I'm aware, we're not seeing that. So the causes of this could be down to, I suppose, what a lot of you left comments in the last video in the comment section and suggested. And you know, I can't talk about that because it's against policies. So if you know, you have an idea of what that could be caused to by, you know, you're probably not far off, as far as I'm concerned, the bullseye. And, you know, as was noted by a lot of people in the last video, they also pinpointed it down to that thing that I can't mention. And you know what, it is terrible that, you know, I have to tread very carefully on these matters, because if we really lived in a democracy like we're led to believe, then freedom of speech would be at the heart of that democracy. So, you know, with saying that, we know exactly where we stand. What happened to, you know, the pursuance of freedom of information and freedom of speech in this modern world, and why do these platforms not support it? Now, if you remember, a few months ago I had a meeting with my local Member of Parliament at the MP, and I put it straight out there. I said, are you chartered in any way with any of these social media companies? He came out quite clearly and said absolutely not. But I find that very difficult to believe, and the reason why I say that is because I do know that governments do fund these social media sites for the reasons of not allowing and stamping on people's opinions, regardless of whether they are way out there or not. They should be allowed to be aired in a world of democracy. You know, this is one of the things that we in the Western countries supposedly pride ourselves. This is something that our governments always pride themselves on, saying that we have a democracy, but we clearly do not. And the reason why we don't is because there is no regulation on platforms such as the one that we're on right now, you know, saying or warning them or even penalising them for stamping on the freedoms that we are led to believe that we are entitled to. In my opinion, if a social media platform such as this one, or TikTok or Twitter, infringes on those freedoms within this democracy in a territory that respects or supposedly respects them, then they should be heavily penalised and, you know, at the worst case scenario, banned from broadcasting in these countries. That would stop this neo-Nazi behaviour that we are witnessing now, because this is nothing too different to what we witnessed back in 1939 when, you know, the Nazis were burning literature. You know, we've seen this throughout our history. It's absolutely disgraceful, and like I say, it goes against every grain of being anything to do with democracy, because like I said, you know, freedom of speech should be at the heart of democracy, and it's clearly not. Now, I want to talk about something else equally important, because the wool is being pulled all over our eyes. As part of what we do here at this observatory, we don't just monitor the magnetosphere from various locations, or the magnetic intensity from various locations around the world. We do a few other things. We monitor oxygen levels in the atmosphere. We also monitor, more importantly, and to this topic, CO2. Now, we've got at least a good 2 years, nearly 3 years of archive data showing clearly that CO2 is falling. None of your mainstream medias are picking this up. None of your meteorological departments are talking about this. And, you know, this should be out there so that everybody can see it, because this is the beginnings of the ends of CO2 causing climate change. Over the last 12 months, if you just go into the archive, write down the dates by the amounts of CO2 parts per million, you will find it is dropping. The reason why we know that for certain is because we monitor CO2 every month, and have done for nearly 3 years now, or maybe more. So we know that CO2 is dropping, yet they are still talking about net carbon zero by 2030, which is, on the back of a pandemic, destroying global economies. I want you to think about that. It has changed industries, it has tripled our energy costs, and it is all based on bogus data. We are an observatory with the correct equipment, and we follow the scientific procedure in collecting that data, and CO2 is starting to drop. NOAA, the European Space Agency, NASA, and all the other organisations are not revealing this information. And that is because CO2 industries are worth trillions of pounds, but they're also costing us trillions of pounds at the same time collectively. I want you to just let that sink in for a moment, because it's very important. In a short time in the near future, they are going to have to come clean on this, because I'm sure I'm not the only observatory or person with a CO2 detector that is noticed CO2 declining. And I want to point out why that likely is, and why it rose in the first place in the next clip. Hold on with me. So as you can see, at the right hand column where zero is represented, that is the current time period that we're in right now. Only the CO2 is off the chart according to this data that's been collected to build this chart, and that's just to prove that CO2 has gone beyond anything ever witnessed before, but that is only because we haven't accurately done the core samples in the past to find out that there is a very brief time period where CO2 does accelerate beyond, you know, the normality. You can see clearly where we are. We are 6,000 to 8,000 years returning into a glacial period that lasts well over 90,000 years. And that is when the northern hemisphere looks more like the Arctic Circle on a regular basis. Now just bear that in mind, because it's just been declared that we have reached 8 billion people on this planet. And we already know that through climate change we are witnessing, you know, crop losses globally. And, you know, obviously it has led to some alarmism, I suppose, with relationship to how are we going to feed 8 billion people during climate crisis, where we need to produce food for those 8 billion people. But what the point I wanted to bring home here was, look, you can see that when temperature starts to rise into an interglacial period, we have a rise in CO2. That is the trigger point. I've drew a black line across the whole chart there, and it's around zero. The difference between a glacial period and an interglacial period is really only around 6 to 8 degrees Celsius. That's all it takes to drop or plummet the Earth back into a glacial period. But it's also the trigger point at where CO2 increases, and when the temperature falls below that, it's also the trigger point for it to decrease as well, and we've already hit that from what I can see. You'll notice that, you know, in the last 20 years we've had people like Al Gore pop their face up onto the mainstream social platforms and declare that, you know, our children would not see snow ever after 2014, and there'd be no ice whatsoever in the Arctic or Antarctic regions, and therefore we would make animals like polar bears extinct. Well, it's 2022 and we're already starting to see this. And of course, if you look at the legend, if you can see it, I know the resolution isn't that good, but it does say updated on the the 21st of the 11th 2022. So it's today it was updated, and you can see the red line which represents 2022 above all the other lines going back to 2012. That's a 10-year increase on sea ice, which has led to over 2 million square kilometres of ice rebounded back over the Arctic region. So there is no danger of us making polar bears extinct, and this, I believe, is evident that our Earth is beginning to cool, and we've passed the thermocline already in the Milankovitch cycle, which is the slightly more elliptic as opposed to the spherical orbit that we travel around our sun, that determines whether we are in a glacial or interglacial period. Just to put this into perspective, the amount of ice that has rebounded would cover the entire European community, including England and Ireland. It's a huge, vast quantity of space. It's a large area of ice. Again, no mainstream mention of this by either media or organisations such as NASA, NOAA, ESA or any other. It's because it doesn't fall in line with what they're trying to do, which is, justify the tripling of your energy costs. Now, the reason why we're able to bring you this information related to CO2 is because, collectively we all got together and we purchased the CO2 equipment a few years ago, and we've kept a log every month since then on the levels of CO2. Let's say we know that CO2 is falling right now, and we know also that in the last 10 years sea ice has been rebounding. Both these things are linked, and it's down to the lack of information filtering back to you guys. So without websites like this, or without observatories like ours, you remain in the dark, full stop. And this is what I've been trying to get through to people, like we witnessed on the last video, 9,000 people. When are you going to join in and help support the observatory? Because do you realise how important this information is, and where you can't get this information that we submit here? I don't care what you say. There is not another YouTube channel that is a working observatory using the scientific methods. There's not another observatory on YouTube. And to my knowledge, there isn't another observatory on the web where they cover just as much as what we do. We don't just cover sea ice, the trimag data, the magnetosphere data, or the global magnetometer data. We cover volcanic eruptions daily, sea ice extent, Schumann frequency, other magnetometer data from other observatories. We cover earthquakes. We cover a lot more, guys, and it's there. And as always, it's not charged for, so we don't bar poor people that can only earn a couple of bucks a day in countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and all the other countries in those poorer regions. We don't charge them, so they get a heads up regardless, and that is a service to millions of people, even though it is on offer to them. We do only see 20,000 people visit the website every week, which is okay. It's not a bad sum of people. So the bottom line is that we've all got to help each other in times of crisis like what we're facing right now. Just 4 months away from possibly climate getting out of control on our planet, and yet we see the majority of 9,000 people, failing to step forward and support. And please, don't insult my intelligence in saying that we are all in the West struggling at this point in time. I want to ask the question, are we struggling really that bad that we've fell to the levels of, first world countries like Pakistan, India, Iraq? No, is the honest answer. The reason why people fail to step up to that line and help others is simply because of a couple of reasons. They're out for themselves, and we know that there's a lot of people that have got that mindset right now. Good luck to those. Or they simply are on the budget line and they can't afford it. But there is no way I will accept 9,000 people on the budget line. No way, because that would be an insult to anybody's intelligence, wouldn't it? So there must be either another reason then. I suppose they could be just bone idle and lazy, can't be bothered. Or maybe they just don't want to help. If that's the case, it's very sad. It's not the way this universe is, I can guarantee you that. Maybe this universe over the last week or so has lent on you to make it more of an effort to help, observatories like ours, stay in the game. Because with what we're putting up with on this platform, it's clear that they don't want us funded, because they have refused, even advert revenue now, for no good reason. So I'll say what I usually do. There's a link down there if you want to help. It's not mandatory. We do not charge. We never have done. It's a donations link, which means it's not mandatory. It's only if you want to. The link is there, and I really hope that you are the people that want to. Guys, I wish you all the best. Take care of your loved ones. And I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.